Welcome to this presentation. This is my personal opinion, that defines who elves truly are. Traditionally, according to mainstream beliefs, elves are supernatural beings, who supposedly existed in many cultures during the medieval period. Elves are usually described as very attractive human-like figures with pointy ears, magic personal powers, and other talents. However, different types of elves had been reported. Some elves were described as beautiful and seductive, others are strong and demonic, and special elves were small and cute. In some regions elves were considered evil, and in other regions people would compare them to gods. People often hated elves, believing that they bring misfortune and diseases. But other people or cultures would see elves as angelic beings, who bring joy and good fortune. People would say that elves play magic tricks on them, or cause strange daily occurrences. So what does this all mean? Let's get the biggest question out of the way. Why do elves have pointy ears? Those ears are represented by the artists in various styles. In my opinion, pointy ears represent special ability to hear things others never hear. And these pointy ears is just an artistic representation to show such special abilities. I do believe that elves had normal ears, but people needed an artistic trick to represent elves in their drawings and other records they were trying to create. Keep in mind that most ordinary people back then did not know how to read or write, but were able to draw. Let me explain it further. Back then it was a crazy world. Most lands were wild, covered with forests, and nature was mostly untouched. In such an environment, an ability to hear things like animals could really help a person to survive. Stories say that most elves lived in the forests. And most of the time such forests were endless. But over the centuries people used all the wood to make fire, homes and other items. During that time it was normal to live in the forest, but only brave people could do so. Ancient societies needed people to be there, deep in the forest, near the main trail people had been using for travel. People who lived in the forests all the time were necessary for travelers to get directions and guidance. It was almost like a job back then, to stay in the forest. Stories say that villagers, who did not like elves, would kick them out from their community, and the only place elves could go was the forest, where resources were abundant. Elves were superior in their ability to hear nature and navigate the forests just like wild animals. This does not mean that elves were wild like animals, but they would bond with natural cycles in the forest better than ordinary people. And, in my opinion, in the event when a person was identified as an elf, that person would be told by their community to go and live in the forest, because there was such a need for someone to be there, and medieval communities did not have jails or prisons. Sending someone to the forest was the only way to punish someone back then, and free the community from an odd individual. Let's just say it was almost a court order by the community to expand their populated territory by using elves as pioneers to start new communities. However, spending long years in the wild does change people, and elves would acquire a special vibe that most people would find strange. Communities of elves in the forests would set their own rules of conduct, and outsiders would sense that those forest people were different, just like you would sense something different about a person who is from another country. Elves were able to hear people from far away, like animals would. I personally believe that elves had plenty of time to learn the secret language of wild animals. I believe they acquired abilities to read the minds of animals. And this led to artists representing elves with those pointy ears. They had to distinguish them from others somehow in their drawing. And such drawings were the only medium back then to record information. It looks like in most cultures elves were not aggressive, and they would not attack people who are traveling through the forests, but they would hear and observe them from large distances. Elves would help them in exchange for something they needed. Animals of the same species, in the wild, have abilities to communicate with each other over long distances in order to group together again and navigate their territory searching for food. The same skill to hear each other was acquired by elves. This pointy ears also mean that elves can hear each other over a distance, in the forest. It was a form of natural telepathy that was granted to elves by nature as a survival skill, similar to what animals have. This made some communities compare elves to gods with supernatural powers. And elves were eating really good natural diet. They were very fit to travel through the forest, and probably did not make any alcohol of any kind. These good habits made elves evolve to be physically superior. Healthy lifestyle for several generations will always create a more attractive and healthy offspring. And records say that elves had pure charm and vibe that made them more seductive. Elves, who were small and short, evolved to be that way, because in their area being small was better for survival, and it was easier for them to hide from anyone evil, who was traveling through the forest. In order to identify friends and enemies, elves used their special ability to hear human thoughts. Such abilities would make ordinary humans mad, and they would label elves as evil and bad. Today, elves would be classified as mentally ill, perhaps schizophrenic. I personally believe that besides hearing the thoughts of animals and people, elves could communicate with spirits. This ability to hear spirits in nature gave elves an ability to receive magical information from other dimensions. Later, when the ability to read and write became popular in most communities, elves would return and would learn those skills. I think they wanted to create records about themselves and about what they know. This makes me believe that elves did write many early books. And such books contain certain information that was labeled as sorcery or magic. Today such books would be labeled forbidden. I personally believe that reading an ancient book written by elves can truly give a person some magical powers. And such magical powers can be activated with the mind of the reader or a teacher, life force, spirits or chakras. And you probably heard how ancient church would hunt for such forbidden books and prosecute people who would read or write them. Church would burn witches to eradicate such knowledge. Such witches were elves, or had contact with them, and wanted to use dangerous magic some elves had shared with them. Elves knew evil magic to defend themselves from others. Church of that time believed that such knowledge was not for women to know, and would burn witches to create fear in local communities. Witch hunt made elves go into hiding. And all books elves and witches had created were found and destroyed. But I am sure, some were secretly saved and hidden. Male elves and sorcerers were captured and tortured, to get the knowledge they received from the spirits and nature. I believe that captured male elves and sorcerers were turned into warlocks to serve their masters for the sake of gaining control and power. Later warlocks created occults. And elves decided to hide forever, because more and more people wanted to know dark magic for personal gain. Let me repeat. This presentation is my personal opinion about elves and their role in our history. It is your decision to believe this or not, but most likely we will never know true details about how it all happened.